Hey everyone, what's up? Welcome back to Step Forward, the channel for personal development through great books. This week, I want to share a book called Philosophy for Life and Other Dangerous Situations. The author is Jules Evans. I'm pretty sure when I say the word philosophy, a lot of us immediately think of something high and mighty, hard to grasp, and not very useful for real life. Ordinary people like us are already so busy with our daily lives, how could we possibly have the time to dive into something so deep? Or think back to school. Philosophy class was a total nightmare for a lot of people, myself included. Back then, I was just trying to cram enough to pass the exam. But looking back now, I realize it was because I didn't have the foundational knowledge or a complete, accurate understanding of what philosophy really means. In reality, philosophy isn't some distant knowledge, it's a profound truth. It's active and present right here in our everyday lives. When you feel lost for the future and don't know what to do in the present, Socrates would tell you, the unexamined life is not worth living. When you want to give up and run away from reality, Nietzsche would remind you, he who has a why to live can bear almost any how. And when you're lost in the pursuit of happiness and can't find joy, Aristotle would tell you, happiness is the activity of the soul in accordance with virtue. Just saying this gives me chills, in a good way, because I think science today is so diverse and advanced. AI researchers work on robots every day. Aerospace technology aims for the stars and oceans. Biotechnology focuses on the microscopic. Only philosophy still thinks and cares for the inner world of human beings. Philosophy has always been trying to help each of us figure out how to live this one life well. We were born into a hectic era, and life is full of complications. When faced with the daily grind of making a living, we don't know how to handle the pressure of the high cost of living. In modern society, we don't know how to deal with the cold indifference of those around us. And when facing difficulties, suffering, and failure, we've often felt helpless. This era has taught us how to make money, how to get ahead, but it hasn't taught us how to be happy. That's why we still see a reality where young people have their own sorrows, middle-aged people have their midlife crisis, and the elderly have their own pains. Everyone in this era seems to have their own set of problems. And this is exactly what the book Philosophy for Life wants to convey to all of us. The author of the book, Jules Evans, is an honorary research fellow at the Center for the History of the Emotions at Queen Mary University of London. Evans has written for major media outlets in Europe and America for a long time and has given a large number of lectures on the philosophy of life. In 2013, he was named one of the new generation thinkers by the British media. But what's really noteworthy here is that Evans himself once suffered from severe depression. He went through an incredibly painful time. In his moment of deepest suffering, he encountered the philosophy of Albert Ellis and Aaron Beck, the inventors of cognitive therapy, particularly the ABC model. And it was this cognitive therapy that helped Evans overcome his depression. This therapy was inspired by the famous ancient Stoics and was influenced by the philosopher Epictetus. He once said, "Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them." This is the philosophy of someone born in 55 AD in ancient Rome, but it's still applicable to modern life. It also became the catalyst for cognitive therapy, which has helped countless people. In the ABC model, A is the event, B is your belief about the event, and C is the emotional consequence. If you want to change a situation that's bothering you, you can't start with A, because no matter how you change A, if your belief about the issue, B, doesn't change, you'll still end up with the same painful result, C. Therefore, the only way to reduce the stress is to change your belief at B. The Stoic school of Epictetus is the origin of cognitive therapy, and this therapy saved the author, Jules Evans, giving him a wonderful mindset and life afterwards. According to Socrates, philosophy is closely related to a person's mental and physical health. But the problem is, many people don't realize they've been taught by their parents, influenced by their culture, and are even being assimilated and heavily influenced by those around them. People don't know that their emotions can actually be controlled by learning the wisdom of philosophy.
The intellectual power that comes from philosophy is truly strong and magical. It can help us strengthen our inner core. You see, modern people seem to be very fragile. No matter how much money we have, no matter how healthy our bodies are, if our minds are fragile, we can be knocked down in an instant. It is for this reason that Evans introduced and integrated the ideas of ancient sages into this book, with the hope of bringing the light of these candles to more people. He also hopes that we can return to ancient philosophical ideas to connect with modern life, find worthy ways of thinking, and strengthen our inner selves in our practical lives today. All right, next up, I'll share with you some classic schools of thought so that the wisdom of philosophy and the enlightening flame from the ideas of the sages can spread into our own lives. From there, it can help you solve the practical difficulties you face. Stoicism, as strong as a rock, resiliently steering one's own life. Before talking about Stoicism, let me tell you a story. In 1991, during the Gulf War, there was a woman named Rhonda Cornum. She was a flight surgeon on a helicopter. One day, her helicopter was suddenly shot down, breaking her arms and ribs. Her legs and almost her entire body were severely injured. But it didn't stop there. Even more unfortunately, she was captured by local soldiers. They forced her onto an armed truck. On that bumpy truck, an Iraqi soldier raped her. Her male colleague, tied up next to her, could only watch helplessly. But during this process, she wasn't in pain because of the humiliation, but because every strong movement made her broken bones scream in agony. After being thrown from the truck, her male colleague came to her and said, "You must be in so much pain. I think you're so strong." She replied, "So what do you think I should do? Should I cry?" To her, at that moment, crying was just a useless act. After that, Cornum was imprisoned in a POW camp. This was truly the most terrifying time of her life because she was suddenly stripped of all freedom. Everything in her life was dictated by others, and death loomed over her at any moment. But in the end, fortunately, she was rescued. And in her later life, she was not haunted by the humiliation, nor did she have trouble reintegrating into society after that horrific time. On the contrary, she became a lecturer for comprehensive health courses for the U.S. military. When she talked to others about being raped by an Iraqi soldier on that truck, she would often say, "Being raped was not the biggest thing in my life." To be able to say that, she must have had an incredibly strong life philosophy. And indeed, she once shared, "At that time, one of my most important principles was that I would only change what I could change and would not complain about what I couldn't change." This is very similar to the circle of influence and circle of concern we talked about in The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, right? What I need to do in this life should be the things within my circle of influence, and I won't waste time or focus on things outside of it. And this is also a central philosophy of Stoicism. It was this philosophy that helped her create an armor to protect herself from external enemies, so she could overcome all the hardships and pain she had to endure with her own incredibly strong inner self. Among the Stoics, one of the most famous philosophers is Epictetus. He was born a slave, and a slave in ancient times was equivalent to a piece of property. They had no personal freedom, not even the right to their own life. Epictetus was sold as a child. His first master broke his leg. Fortunately, when he was sold to his second master, this more enlightened owner discovered his philosophical talent and allowed him to go into the city to learn from the Stoics. He gradually became a philosopher and even a secretary to the Roman Emperor Nero. Later, he was freed and founded a school to teach philosophy. Many aristocrats, including another Roman emperor, became his students. Hearing this, you might think Epictetus was a real winner in life. From a slave, he could make a comeback to become a great philosopher, the head of a famous school, and the teacher of an emperor. You'd probably think he must have been incredibly wealthy, right? But the reality was quite different. Epictetus was indeed very famous and had a great influence on posterity, but he was poor his whole life. He lived in a small hut with just a bed, a mat, a lamp, and a door that was never locked. A later Roman emperor, believing Stoicism was not beneficial to the state, exiled him. In exile, he continued his work of teaching philosophy.
Gradually, the meaning of the word Stoic expanded to mean resilience, just like Epictetus. No matter how bad the environment was, the insurmountable difficulties, like not having enough food or warm clothes, having no money, it was all normal to him, and he considered it his daily life. But how could he be so resilient? It was because he always had a central thought that steered his life. He divided the world into two categories: things we can control and things we cannot control. You'll notice that in life there are so many things we can't control. We can't control all aspects of our lives. We don't know when we'll die. We can hardly control our health and wealth, our surroundings, the government where we live, our neighbors, how our children do in school, or our relationships with our boss, friends, relatives, and even our life partner. All these are things we cannot control. We even have to face the call of death at any moment. As the Tibetans say, we never know which will come first, tomorrow or the next life. So what are the only things we can control? Epictetus tells us it is our beliefs. Beliefs are the only thing we can control. He also said that most of our suffering comes from two mistakes. The first mistake is that we try to assert complete sovereignty over something that is outside our control, meaning we try to control what we cannot, and then, when we can't, we feel helpless, angry, guilty, anxious, or it leads to depression. The second mistake is that we don't put enough effort into the things we can control, and we don't take responsibility for our actions, thoughts, and beliefs within that realm. Instead, we blame the outside world, our parents, friends, lover, boss, the economy, the environment, social hierarchy, or our circumstances. And in the end, we still end up suffering and helpless. We resent that life is so unfair to us. All emotional turmoil and suffering stem from these two fatal mistakes. And this is the absurdity that Epictetus of the Stoics pointed out to us. Epicureanism, achieving happiness, is simpler than we think. There was a philosopher who believed that happiness is the whole of life. He is one of the most important figures in the history of philosophy, Epicurus. Around 400 BC, when the Stoics were on the rise, Epicurus and his friends pooled their money to buy a house in the suburbs and named it the Garden. He rarely went out, mostly living in his garden, a life almost cut off from the world. For him, achieving true joy was very simple: to let himself reach a state of tranquility, free from disturbance, and then learn to enjoy it. At the entrance to the garden, there was a sign that read, "Stranger, here you will do well to tarry. Here, our highest good is pleasure." Epicurus believed that pleasure is very important in life. However, the pleasure Epicurus talked about is different from what we know today. Partying, sleeping in, it's a lot of fun, but that's a kind of pleasure imposed by society. In fact, they are signs of an inability to enjoy life. When a person can't enjoy life, they're always hoping for and demanding more and more material conditions. It seems they think that only by having more material things than others, they can have more happiness. This is not a true state of happiness. The source of happiness is simply experiencing the beauty of life. Therefore, he advocated the people should not do jobs like work more, earn more, because that would cultivate greed. The happiness Epicurus valued most was living a simple life, consuming simple things, accepting necessary labor, and thus maintaining one's health. We don't necessarily have to live in seclusion like Epicurus, but we can maintain a distance from the noisy, bustling life. Occasionally return to nature, find a sense of belonging in a leisurely, peaceful life. Haruki Murakami might be someone greatly influenced by Epicureanism. He advocates that we should work hard to be able to have small certainties. What we call happiness is actually not as complicated as we imagine. The key lies in how we seek happiness. Happiness stems from good character. And finally, I'll talk about Aristotle, one of the greatest philosophers, scientists, and educators in ancient world history. Aristotle is famous not only for his philosophy, but also because he was a naturalist. One of his greatest achievements was teaching the famous Alexander the Great. Aristotle advocated that happiness is the greatest and best good. Therefore, to have a happy life, people should choose to live a virtuous life. In other words, happiness comes from good character. So how do we acquire good character? He pointed out that the way for people to cultivate good character is to constantly find the golden mean.
So, what is the golden mean? For example, courage is a good virtue, and courage is the golden mean between recklessness and cowardice. Or humor is also a good virtue because it's the golden mean between being too serious and being too flippant. This philosophy of the golden mean is similar to Confucius's concept of the doctrine of the mean. Mean means not leaning to any extreme, and doctrine means being appropriate to the circumstances. In other words, doing anything in excess is not good. One should find the most suitable point in one's thoughts and actions. So, in the end, what is happiness? Which philosophical idea is right for you? In reality, there is no single correct answer to this question. The key lies in what you need. If a person is lost, without purpose, and weak-willed, they will need stoicism to become more stable and resilient. But a person who is living too hastily, busy, short-tempered, pragmatic, and greedy will need to use Epicurus's philosophy of happiness to find a connection with their inner self. Only with the peaceful mind can one find true joy. And I'm not introducing this book to make you believe in or become a follower of any particular philosophical idea and then copy it blindly. You must remember that your life is yours, and only you know what you need at what time, where, and how you can apply which philosophy for yourself. And the last thing I want to say is, when you feel too much pressure from the outside world, when you're bound by reality and you feel you can't see or find joy, then calm down and look into your own heart. You'll see that all our helplessness towards the outside world usually stems from the helplessness in our own hearts. Philosophy is a kind of knowledge that brings energy to the human heart. It doesn't ask us to believe in anything. It only asks us to reflect, to find solutions to problems. When the problems in your heart are solved, the problems in your life will also be solved. Finally, back to the title of this book, Philosophy for Life. In fact, it's not about advising you to choose a philosophy to guide your life, but that we should use philosophy as a tool and the ideas of ancient sages as a means to open a path to a happier life in our present. Instead of being unconsciously assimilated by life day after day, talk to yourself more often, reflect more, pay attention to your experiences, frequently check in with your own thoughts and emotions, and find the thoughts and actions that can make you truly happy. Of course, what I've introduced today is just a small part of the book. The entire book doesn't just talk about the 3 great philosophers mentioned above, but brings us 12 teachers in total. I hope that today's book will open a new window for you to see the impact of Western philosophy on yourself and to see whether these philosophical concepts have an impact on you and how you can use that philosophy in your life. This is a very important question when reading this book. I hope everyone will love and explore philosophy more. Later, if there's a chance, we can discuss and share more about modern philosophers like Nietzsche or Schopenhauer. All right. That's all I want to share about this book. I'll end the video here. Thank you for listening. If you found this video helpful, please share it with those who need it. Support Step Forward with a like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to catch the latest videos. Once again, thank you sincerely. See you in the next videos.